where government gets involved in the New Deal called the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority. If you ride along Route 40 in Tennessee, you can see various signs for the TVA. It exists even today. It was a series of power dams and electrical stations, basically a kind of state socialism. So you see, Roosevelt's trying out everything. Just giving money away, state socialism, helping select groups. Your textbook in chapter 25 talked about the fact that the New Deal is a great dam builder. And of course the Great Hoover Dam was finished during this time. That's great for electrification, in many ways irrigation. Does anyone remember what chapter 25 though also said about dams? And this is also a concern today. Today it seems that the scientific current's running the other way. Dams are seen to be more and more evil. Does anyone know why? Yeah, it wrecks the fish and it wrecks the environment in a lot of ways. A lot of these dammed up lakes become more saline. I mean, Texas only had one lake. Caddo Lake was the only true lake, the only freshwater lake in the whole state. I mean, today we've got all kinds of lakes, and that's because we're destroying our rivers. The Sulphur River used to be a lot bigger. I mean, you used to take boats down the Sulphur River, or the White Oak Creek. You can kind of see if you go north to Clarksville. All those rivers are kind of like dipping because we're creating, we're impounding like a lake every 10 years in northeast Texas. And of course, Dallas wants the Nichols Reservoir in southern Red River County so that Dallasites can have water and not be sure. We want to subsidize our bad front lawn habits. No city in the nation is worse in drawing water to water the front lawns than Dallas. And the question is, do they really deserve it? Any comments or questions? I wish we were kind of getting away a little bit from the complexity, but trying to intervene in the economy does get pretty sophisticated. And we actually do have two other things we can note. There is a branch of liberalism that goes right into socialist ideology, and that is that a government, if it starts planning things, could avoid a lot of the problems of laissez-faire capitalism. Let the government, really smart people, plan where the road should be. Let them plan where the dam should be. Let them plan where the mines should be, not the market. And so there was a branch in the New Deal that got into this, and the people that believed in planning got associated with the Public Works Administration under Harold Ickes, a former rich Chicago lawyer who wanted to take a look at the United States and kind of revamp things. Finally, you have an effort, now this is reform we're talking about. PWA was a new way, a totally new approach. We have the wage and price fixer known as the NRA, where the government actually tries to set the price of gaskets or chewing gum or children's clothing. We had this as recent as about 40 years ago. The government did a little bit of this as well. But wouldn't that be kind of oppressive, the government just telling you, hey, you can only employ your employees at this kind of rate? Well, actually, they tried to make it a little voluntary in the 1930s. They had this Blue Eagle campaign, and any employer that would observe the NRA ideas about wages and prices, they could get to use a Blue Eagle on their storefront or in their logo because they were complying with federal guidelines. But of course, to some companies that didn't want to abide by that, that made them seem unpatriotic. So they were kind of upset what the government was doing. Again, though, the government is a little anti-production. They're trying to drive down production. They're trying to rise up wages and also prices in the NRA. So let's just very shortly go over that again. We have giving money out, Works Progress Administration, WPA. We've got three programs to get groups on their feet: the farmers, the AAMA, the young people of the CCC, and the Tennessee Valley Tennessee Valley Authority. We've got the wage and price fixer, the NRA, and we've got the big planning thing that has a P in its name, Public Works Administration. Now, all these are, of course, different ideas in a lot of ways. You know, you've got socialism with the TVA, you've got, just price supports with AAA, just paying young people, employing them by government, although that raises issues about apprenticeships with young people as opposed to having union control. So a lot of this is controversial. You get Harry Hopkins here with the WPA that says, spend, 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 elect, elect, elect. And then you have Harold Ickes, the Chicago lawyer, who's saying, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing employing all these people willy-nilly? We're supposed to be planning this economy. And Harry Hopkins would go, of course, Harry Hopkins was Franklin's favorite. He would go to Roosevelt and say, go ahead, Harry, wink, wink, wink. Just spend and spend, let's get some Democrats elected again, we'll do wonders. Then Harold would come into the office and he'd say, well, Harold, the WPA is just a temporary thing. We're going to get people back on their feet again, but really, Harold, it's you I really believe in for the long term. So you just keep on working, Harold, and so he kind of played people against one another, but just have this whole smorgasbord of liberal things going on at the same time. Well, does it help? Does big government trying out all these little things at once, does it make the difference? Well, at first, people do sort of feel a kind of jolt of adrenaline, and the economy seems to be coming out in early 1933, but then all of a sudden, it starts to plummet again in 1934. Again, people can't really explain why. Should government have sunk even more money into the situation? Was there some sort of national guilt complex? Was it because the Federal Reserve wasn't lending enough money out there? It all ramifies into your political views, how you want to maybe see this, or what economic theory you might want to subscribe to. But in any case, they weren't getting out of the problem. And hence we have, in 34, 35, a new set of challenges, many of them political, as people are getting so desperate, as we're staying in this depression, they're beginning to look to certain political saviors to get us out of the depression, or even more radical than Roosevelt. Now we have a unique group of politicians coming in at this kind of worst moment in American history, in a sense, in 1934. Some people have called them demagogues, as if they were more emotional than the average American politician, maybe debatable. Some have called them quacknocrats, that is, they've stereotyped them as gimmick kind of guys that really didn't know what they were doing. Maybe we should call them calamity critics, because they shout a lot, and they did reflect a lot of the anger that was in society at this time. One of them was a kind of ne'er-do-well physician, even as a physician he hadn't made out very well, called Francis Townsend from Long Beach, California. This peppery guy who had a mustache and liked to wear white suits had been pretty much unable to do anything really constructive in his life until, as an older man, he wrote an editorial to a Long Beach, California newspaper, and he said, one way we could really solve this depression is if the government would give everyone over the age of 60 $200 a month. And old people, being patriotic, of course, would not save this money. What would they have to save it for? They would spend this money, and then they'll spend us out of the depression. Well, that idea went viral, and soon there were thousands of Townsendite clubs throughout the country thinking, hey, we're just going to give every old person $200 a month to spend, and then start revving up demand. Of course, how did he want to pay for it? He wanted a 2% sales tax on every transaction, which economists then and now thought was kind of like trying to mint the moonlight into silver and coin the sunshine into gold. It was totally unfeasible. Franklin Roosevelt tries a lot of questionable things himself. At one point, he's trying to determine the price of gold, and he doesn't really know what he's doing. But he refuses to even see Townsend because he views Townsend as such a quack. But still, he's got the problem. Townsend's starting to wield this huge political influence on the very left that he's trying to appeal to. And what's he going to do if his supporters start going over too much to this Long Beach position. And Townsend's very virulent. On the stump, we can imagine him in a place like Cleveland, attracting 5,000 supporters in November of 1934 on a weeknight. And Townsend appears on the stage after they've been singing some songs and hymns. He's all these old people in the auditorium. He gets on and he says, "Dang it! The varmints in our government have forgotten about you. The banks have robbed you of your savings. And the employers don't want your wisdom anymore. But you all in my book are nothing less than civil veterans of the republic for which it stands. So now we're going to come together. We're all going to join hands. Come on now, join hands. Show some gumption, will you? Let's all join hands and start singing, 'Onward, Christian soldiers, march!'" And they would sing these Christian hymns and get kind of riled up and talk about this Townsendite plan. And most Democrat politicians graduated from Grinnell or Cornell or Chicago are saying, "This guy's nuts. Franklin, you can't do this possibly." But that's just one of the problems in this political environment when it seems like nothing's working and America's undergoing meltdown. Another interesting politician that raises his voice at this time is a former, he's a priest, Charles Coughlin. Charles Coughlin, he was from a social-minded order, the Basilian Order of the Roman Catholic Church, that had been concerned about the Depression. Pretty much he rose to fame in the 1920s as a great radio voice. He had a very charming musical voice on the radio. He had a shrine in Michigan, a Little Flower Shrine. They called it the Golden Hour with the Little Flower. But he begins to start wandering into political topics as the Great Depression goes on. He has a lot of Roman Catholics, blue-collar type workers in the Great Lakes area. He's based in Royal Oaks, Michigan. And at first, Coughlin, like a lot of Irish word bosses, says, "The New Deal is God's deal." He's pro-Roosevelt. But basically, him and his National Union for Social Justice want inflation of money, kind of like the populists, but only more drastic. And he starts making himself a pest around the White House. Franklin doesn't really want to see him, although he's a lot more popular than even Townsend is. He gets more fan mail in late 1934 than Franklin Roosevelt does. Coughlin has 15 secretaries answering all his mail. Well, Coughlin is really shooting off, too. And we can imagine him now in a context having 50,000 people on an average night in late 1934 in a baseball stadium in a major city. And they have bands playing and people looking like various figures from American history all dressed up. And suddenly Coughlin appears with his monocle, his white collar, and his black religious costume. And he says, "It is written in the Constitution that Congress has the power to coin and regulate the value of money. That's good Americanism, and it's good enough for me. But Congress doesn't believe in that part of the Constitution. They're not even good Americans, these so-called Democrats and Republicans. They may say that that's right. Well, the real radicals are the Simon Legrees of high finance who take the whip upon your shoulder and try to exploit from your pocketbook your last penny. We have tried to stay hard-boiled with Harding. We have tried to stay out of the war with Woodrow. And now we're trying to write a new deal with Franklin Delano." Harping on that last name of his mother, Delano, who was a rich woman in New York. So, someone who is really wants Congress to just get more money out there, but again, they see this as a kind of quacky solution. They don't really, the officials of the government don't want anything to do with him, but what do you do about him? And then finally, there's the great senator of Louisiana, Huey Long, a man born in the northern Wind Parish area of Louisiana, in the Pine area. He becomes a person who is obsessed with political power. He, one time, is confronted by a fellow Louisianan when he's governor, before he becomes senator, and someone comes up to him and says, Governor Long, I'd like you to read this. It's called the Constitution of the State of Louisiana. I don't think you're following it anymore. And Huey Long says, but I am the Constitution. So someone who was almost kind of like acquiring dictatorial power over the state of Louisiana. He was basically taxing the wealthy and paying for new textbooks and roads. Some people thought Huey Long was great. I mean, other people thought, he was like a burgeoning Hitler type person in America. But basically, Huey Long's plan was to slice off big incomes. So say if someone's getting over $1 million a year, slice off everything that's over $1 million. A family estate is over $5 million, the Vanderbilt family. Everything that's over $5 million, slice it off. And give it to the government, to the people, share the wealth a little bit. You think that's a good idea? Never really been tried like that. You kind of say that if you had told Bill Gates in the 1980s they could only earn so much, that he might have been thwarted in his ambition. But in any case, that was his plan, and he was getting more and more powerful. He basically took over the state of Arkansas, got his own senator, Hattie Caraway, a woman elected, who was pro-Long in 1932, taking on Joe Robinson, a great Southern boss. He one time visited the Roosevelt family because Roosevelt was trying to be personable and play him off. And Huey showed up to their family Sunday dinner, really badly shaven, and he had like a pink sport coat and a noisy shirt, and he just started, talking about, we need to. There's 5 Wall Street bankers with more money than all the farmers of Arkansas. We got to start doing something about that. And Sarah Delano's in the room, Franklin's protective mother, and she's listening to this Yoko Southerner guy, and she says loud enough for Huey to hear, who is that horrible man you have sitting over there, Franklin? And he says it's Huey. And of course Huey goes back to Louisiana and says, I've met a man as smart as I am, and I don't think I could deal with him. Huey's plan was to run against Roosevelt in 36, split the Democratic ticket, and then come back when the Republicans had screwed off the economy in 1940 and get elected. So these are 3 huge problems, headaches, for Franklin Roosevelt. How does this very social-minded, small s social guy deal with these major critiques? He's already befriended every liberal there was, left of Herbert Hoover, basically, and tried out all their schemes all at once. And it hasn't gotten us out of the Depression. Now people are saying, go further, try this, try this. Well, one mark of the small s socialist is he's not going to just say, no! To these people. He's going to waffle. He's going to kind of wiggle. And this is what Bill Clinton does later too. He gets thunder. He tries to preempt them. He tries to go in their direction a little bit. And what we have called the Second New Deal in 1935 is really basically an attempt to preempt these guys, to steal their thunder, to kind of turn a corner around them. So why do we have Social Security? Because of Francis Townsend. Why do we have a National Labor Relations Act, which really helps big labor, the same kind of blue-collar types that Charles Coughlin was appealing to? We have it because of Charles Coughlin. Why do we have a Wealth Tax Act in 1935? The Wealth Tax Act was going after inheritances. So we do not have government confiscating Norma's backyard. We've never had that. Because we say, well, Norma, you're too wealthy. We're taking your backyard away. We've never had government do that, but we have had government say that, okay, when Yachts dies, government's going to get a big take of that. Okay, the government's going to take half of that. That's what we have. The Wealth Tax Act in 1935. George Bush, our Texan president, tried to take away the Wealth Tax Act for a while, but Barack Obama reinstated it, so we still have that. Tax against estates, not against the wealthy, but estates. That was all part of Franklin's moving over to try to outflank these guys. It seems, though, too, that Franklin got a little help from God. I'm using that expression loosely during this time. And that is because this guy gets suddenly eliminated. He dies. He's assassinated by a brooding physician, Carl Weiss, in Baton Rouge. Indicative of the kind of people Huey had around with him. His bodyguards poured in some 35 bullets to the assassin after he shot Huey Long. in the Louisiana State Corridor building. But that eliminated that problem. And I'm saying, again, it's kind of divine intervention in a sense, because there was a bishop, Edward Mooney, of the Detroit area. Bishops, of course, hold the diocese in the Roman Catholic Church in fee simple. They're extremely powerful people. And Coghlan was really kind of sounding off his lip. Like, at one point he was saying that, "I think Roosevelt ought to be shot!" Well, that was going a little over the top, and Mooney decides to silence him. He threatens to defrack Coghlan. He keeps on talking politics. And Coghlan is a good Roman Catholic, priest. He doesn't want to, go in and be excommunicated, so he shuts up. And so, in a sense, gets a little divine intervention too. And also, a lot of Townsend's followers died off too. I don't know when, because they were older. Although Townsend goes on to live for a few more decades yet. But basically, Roosevelt was somewhat lucky. He doesn't have any major challenger. He looked like he was going to have 3 in 1936. And he does stave off the left. The problem, though, is that as he waffles over to the left, the Republicans are waiting on the right and saying, "What is this guy, some sort of socialist?" And we have the Liberty Leagues and the attack on Roosevelt in the 1936 election by the DuPont family and by a lot of rich Texans like H.L. Hunt, who was the richest man in America, who just fear government regulation of oil and feel that he's becoming a kind of like dictator. L. Landon becomes a Republican frontrunner, a former progressive of Kansas, and yet this election of 36, which is probably the most polarized between the rich and poor in American history, is overwhelmingly won by the poor in 36. So you sometimes think that poor people don't have a chance. Well, if you phrase it well enough, your campaign, as Roosevelt did, he would say, 1/3 of our nation is still ill-clad, ill-nourished, and ill-housed, and what are we doing about it? That still had enough resonance with people. You might see, too, here that Roosevelt had a kind of good humor to him, being a kind of small S socialist, which not all of our politicians have. I'm going to contrast a little bit here Franklin Roosevelt with Ted Cruz, our senator. Both are responding to stinging attacks, and yet we'll see that Roosevelt plays it like a pro, whereas I'm afraid our senator against Trump recently, Ted Cruz, did have a little trouble.
These Republican leaders are not in contempt with the past. On me, on my wife, or on my sons. No, not content with that. They now include my little dog, Cal. Well, of course, I don't resent attacks, and my family don't resent attacks, but Cal does resent attacks.
About Scottish Americans, but this is Ted Cruz, who's also, finding his personal friends being attacked. In this case, his wife, just like Eleanor, was being attacked, but he doesn't quite slide off it as nicely as
My wife, you mess with my kids, that'll do it every time. Donald, you're a sniveling coward and leave Heidi the hell alone.
So will you support him as the nominee?
I'm going to beat him.
That's not
he is not answering the question. Donald Trump will not be the nominee.
He's leading right now. You looked at that camera and said he's a coward. Will you support him as the nominee?
Donald Trump will not be the nominee.
Well, Cruz had a little problem here, but any comments? So the Republicans really get angry at this time, but they did not phrase their approach very well in the election. Roosevelt turned the poor against the rich, wins an overwhelming election victory, and then decides he's going to take this struggle one step further by attacking an agency in Washington that is still not liberal like he is. What major part of the government was still a stick in the mud as far as Roosevelt was concerned in 1936, now that he's won his second major landslide? It was the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court had been picked by the conservative Harding, Coolidge, Harding, Hoover people, had pretty much been saying in the last 2 years, this AAA that's helping the farmers, it's not helping anyone else, it's discriminatory legislation, we're going to throw that out. That's unconstitutional, you can't do the AAA. And what about this pricing wage foods? There's a Jewish poultry firm in New York City that, they can't abide by the Blue Eagle guidelines because they're trying to get kosher meat. That's discrimination. Down with the NRA. Well, the Supreme Court shoots down some big parts of the New Deal, and so Roosevelt gets into his head that he's going to have a new bill passed through that will allow him to appoint a new Supreme Court justice for every Supreme Court justice that's over 60 years of age. I don't know if you've ever seen that Capitol Hill spoof of the Supreme Court justices, where all the Supreme Court justices are kind of lined up in their robes and they're going, stand alive, oh, 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 stand alive. Because Supreme Court justices typically can stay, as long as they're active or alive, I guess. And they still have that power as long as they're alive. Well, anyway, this was also seen as a kind of brazen attack on the Constitution, on the separation of three powers. It was unprecedented. And even though the Republicans had been dwarfed in the election and had basically no influence, there was one part of the government, yet in the Democratic Party, that was a little concerned about what Franklin was doing. And interestingly, this was a Texan, Cactus Jack Gardner. And if anyone ever asks you, was a president or vice president ever born within 60 miles of where you are here in Mount Pleasant? You say yes. Cactus Jack Gardner was born in Red River County. He did later move to Uvalde, Texas. He becomes vice president the first 2 terms under Franklin Roosevelt. But when they had to vote to pack the Supreme Court, like Franklin wanted, to get these additional justices that would be liberal justices, what does Cactus Jack, this Texas vice president, as head of the Senate, do? He goes like that. Like, this bill stinks to high heaven. Does anyone know why he did that? I mean, pretty much tore up his whole political career doing that. Basically, he was worried that Eleanor and Franklin were getting too liberal, and that they were going to move like on oil regulation, and also that they were going to force southern states to stop segregation. So Texas at this time has school segregation. You relate to the 1950s, Governor Ellen Shivers moved against school segregation, surprisingly, when Arkansas was forced to integrate in Little Rock. Mansfield, Texas was not forced to integrate. Texas was one of a unique charm for Dwight Eisenhower. He didn't want to attack it, I guess. But in any case, Garner represents this kind of white Southern concern about the Roosevelts and the encroaching liberalism. So Roosevelt loses this. And in fact, Roosevelt doesn't really shine again too much. The Congress is in full-scale revolt by 38, 39, shooting down little TVA projects and federal theater projects and national youth projects everywhere. But when the dust of the Dust Bowl finally sank in 1940, who, of course, was still sitting there in power? Down, fellas. Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt was a great winner of the Great Depression decade. He stays in power. He enacts whole torrent of liberal bills that help define our government. We don't have the AAA anymore. That was declared unconstitutional. But we do have farm supports yet today. We don't have the CCC, but we still have the Job Corps, and we have like 50 other programs for young people that get employed. We still have various agencies that are carrying out various agendas with dams and PWA projects. So this is still a very lasting legacy. Without getting too political, I think we can say that there are some ironies to think about. One is that though the Americans supported the New Deal overwhelmingly, even in Texas, which would later become really conservative, we voted for Franklin Roosevelt twice, big time. Americans have never paid for the New Deal. That is, we never agreed to loosen up our wallet enough to account for all these programs, and thus we've been in debt ever since the New Deal, bigger and bigger times. Another kind of irony, I suppose, is that though big government can solve problems like the banking crisis, the question is, how do you deal with something like the Great Depression? What was really the answer? And I don't know what you maybe, how you might tend toward that. But I think it's kind of interesting that if you want an extreme of a government that had a huge power over its citizens, I mean, this government was huge, enough to take on anything, it would have to be East Germany in the 1980s. East Germany had 7 times more secret agents than the Nazis had in the Gestapo in the 1930s. So they had like 100-page file on everyone. Like they had a 100-page file like on Sam Norma. And they would know all the times that maybe Norma skipped school in high school, all these reports from teachers. And you would have these political sessions and they would say, Norma, we noticed that your output in school wasn't quite as good. What happened during this time? Do you really care about our communist government? Do you believe in the communist state? If you're not producing, it's sort of like a political problem. But what happened in East Germany with this incredible control, incredible huge government, government everywhere, government surveillance. People didn't have an issue. The main thing that people wanted to do in that regime was not be seen doing anything weird. You didn't really necessarily work harder. You just worked so that you wouldn't be, stereotyped as a political criminal and forced to go in some work camp or something. So, how big does government have to get? Any comments or questions?